Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Fun video today. Do you see this little, well, this kind of large bin right here? We are going to be ranking all the palettes that I've tried out so far in the year 2022. I've had a chance to use all of these. I feel like I've gotten to know them well enough to be able to rank them. And as usual, this was tough. I have a hard time ranking eyeshadow palettes. They're very, very dear to me. I only have 17 palettes here in front of me. That kind of surprised me. Felt like I should give myself a little pat on the back. I think last year I had like 25 by the end of June. So either I'm doing a better job or I have some catching up to do. I always love an eyeshadow palette video of any sort. Before we get into it, a special welcome to those of you that are new visitors here at my channel. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you'll consider subscribing before you leave. With that out of the way, let's get right to it. Okay, so before we get to the ranking, I'm gonna show you guys a bit of a challenge. I want you to see the eyeshadow look that I have going on today. Let me know without cheating and looking down below. Can you guess what palette I'm wearing on my eyes today? Pause, sound off down in the comments below. Okay, so it looks like I miscounted. There are 18 palettes here. So starting with palette number 18. This one was very, very easy. I'm sorry to say, but it's gotta be this palette here from Cara Beauty. This is one that I found at a local Marshall's. I've seen several palettes like this at my Marshall's or my local TJ Maxx's. This specific one is the Cool Whatever smiley face emoji palette. I tried this out in a video a couple months ago. As beautiful as the palette looks, does not look just like a ColourPop palette. So very ColourPop. I was hoping maybe the quality was the same. I dipped into quite a few different shades trying to get them to work for me, and I just couldn't get them to work. I'm kind of sad about that because I was really excited about the idea of a palette this size for 10 bucks is a fantastic deal, but unfortunately just was not quite the quality I was hoping for. Ranked at number 17, I'm gonna go with the Nabla Cutie Midnight palette. This one I should have known was just too far outside of my comfort zone. I have used it a couple of times, but both times I have to force myself to use the blues in here that really make this like a blue palette. Like this blue, and even this navy blue right here is quite blue on the eyes. So unless I'm doing something bronze, which why would I reach into this palette to go for a bronze when I have a million bronzes within my collection? It's just not really a palette for me. That said, if you like blue eyeshadows, if you are not opposed to like cobalt blues, these are stunning. The formulas, the pigmentation, just these little Nabla palettes, I just think are so pretty. All the shades in here are really nice. They're just not very me. Now for my number 16 palette, it is the Essence Taupe It Up palette. Big fan of these palettes, generally speaking. This is my least favorite of the ones that I've tried. There's a couple I don't have. I don't have the blue one. There might be one other that I don't have, but as much as I really like a couple things about this palette, like these 4 shades right here give me very like Natasha Denona Glam vibes, but these 2 grays are just very overly gray for me. So I'm very picky with my grays, I've decided. With cooler tones in general, I like cooler tones that have a bit of like either a purpley undertone to them or even more of like a dusty kind of mauve sort of shade to them, or a little bit of brown in them. Anything that's overly just basic gray, like has no pigmentation outside of like on a grayscale, I just don't think those shades look very good on me. And that's what I found with this palette right here. Something about them when I do an eye look with a gray like this, unless I have like a coral to throw into it or a little bit of something warm to kind of like ground it or bring a little bit of warmth to my face, I just don't think they look all that good on me. Number 15, for this one, I am going with the Juvia's Place Allure 3 palette. Again, everyone from here on out, I feel like I'm gonna apologize for ranking this one so low, and not to you guys, I'm apologizing to the Allure palette. Let's make that clear. My palettes have feelings. So this Allure palette was a really fun one to play with, and I really like it. But this blue, as fun as it is, it's a little bit too bold for me. And once you take that blue out, I can't really get a complete look as far as what I like in an eye look with the rest of this palette. If this was replaced with like a champagne, which would probably make it very boring and a lot like some of the other Juvia's Place palettes I already own, but I would likely reach for this a lot more. Just that blue shade right there just scares me away. You might see a theme here today. Pretty palette if you like a light kind of iridescent blue and corals, but for me and what I typically reach for, just not really my style. Down to number 14. Okay, this palette, I have a feeling this palette is going to move up in the ranking. I initially tried it out, kind of regretted buying it. Then I heard a lot of people say this was like the best palette ever. I saw the reviews that it got online. I was like, why don't I like this palette that much? Now you guys are wondering what it is. I'm talking about the NARS Summer Unrated palette. I did pull this out more recently just to try and get to know this a little bit better because I feel like I'm missing something with this palette. And I will say, I've used it a couple more times and it's kind of grown on me. Right now I'm ranking this at number 14, but I have a feeling this one might move up in the rankings. Now, this is a pretty basic palette. It has a lot of pink tones in here. If you don't like soft pink tones, then you probably wouldn't like this palette. But they are really pretty, and there are some really unique finishes inside here, and the mattes perform really well. This is a really good performing palette. Like, the quality of this is really great. I definitely recognize that. I recognized that the first time I tried it. I just kind of felt like the color story was maybe a little bit boring. This is where I struggle. You guys, I kind of have like two personalities. There's a part of me that, like, generally speaking, my makeup style is pretty natural. I mostly use palettes like this on an everyday basis. I don't do anything too wild, but I think I'm looking for a palette that is a little bit colorful while still being neutral. It's a fine line there that I like my palettes to kind of walk for them to be like perfect palettes for me. I just kind of felt like this one was maybe not quite as like interesting as I was hoping it would be. But again, it's growing on me. The formulas are great. The colors are really pretty. The jury's still kind of out, ranking it at number 14 today. We are down to my number 13 palette. And for this one I feel like has gone down a bit in the ranking. I'm going with the Juvia's Place Nubian Earth palette. This is a really nice palette. I kind of feel bad that the two Juvia's Place palettes that I've tried out so far this year are ranking a little bit on the low side. The thing that I've gotten to know about this palette that I feel like is lacking for me are the matte browns in here. They're very, very cool tone. Like, they basically go a little bit ashy on me, which I'm not always opposed to that, but I almost always will prefer a warmer brown or a more purpley brown than something that's more like cool tone and kind of ashy. And I feel like all three of these tend to go a little too cool in my outer corner. So there they are right there. They're pretty, don't get me wrong. I think they're beautiful. They definitely deepen out that outer corner. I just wish at least one of them had a little bit more red or a little bit more warmth. I do really like the shimmers in here. You get some beautiful gold, some really pretty lid shades. I love this like duochrome right here. I don't know that you can kind of see the iridescence in this shade. It's almost like a greeny yellow gold with white. And then some of these bronzes are pretty. You get like a rose gold kind of bronze shade that's so stunning. It's a nice palette. I just really find myself in all the looks that I do, anytime I'm doing a bronze look, I almost always want my outer corner to be really nice and kind of rich and warm. And these shades are just a little bit cooler than I would like them to be. Ranked at number 12, I'm gonna go with the Nabla Read My Mind palette. This is another palette I feel like should rank higher because I really like this palette, but maybe because I'm trying out so many palettes all the time, this one has been a little bit neglected. Like, I've tried it out enough to where I feel like I know it pretty well. I think I've tried every shade inside here, but it's not what I found myself reaching for among some of the other ones that we'll get to in a little bit. But I do think this is a really nice palette. I love the way this palette is set up. I love that you get like the quadrants of like different looks you could do. You could obviously mix and match. I guess if I really had to try and find something, well, I actually can think of two things to criticize with this palette. Number one, I was really hoping when I bought this palette that it would include some of the creamier matte formulas that I love so much in the Nabla Cutie palettes. It doesn't include any of those. They're all just standard mattes, and while those mattes are really nice, I miss that formula because I think that formula is just so lovely. So I was kind of sad to see that. I also kind of feel like these two quadrants right here, while they're not exactly the same, they kind of are a little repetitive. But that said, it's a beautiful palette. I love that you get some different shimmer formulas in here, which again is another thing I love about Nabla. Very pretty palette. I love the packaging of this one. I think it's my favorite Nabla full-size packaging that I've seen so far. There's a good chance that this one could climb up in the rankings. I feel like there's room for me to get to know this one even a little bit better, but for right now, with what I have in front of it, gotta leave it at number 12. At number 11, this is another one that I maybe could go up in the rankings, although it is quite small and quite pricey. I'm talking about the Pat McGrath Midnight Voyage mini palette. I just tried this out. This barely made the cut, and it's really good. I really like this palette. I love Pat McGrath's shadows. Like, I've really come around to them. I only have two palettes, one of her full-size Midnight Sun palettes and then her Holiday Edition palette. I love them both. I think her formula is really, really stunning, and I think this formula is great. I haven't had any issues with it. I think this is such a fun little compact palette. There's probably people out there that have criticized it for its size. I mean, this is a $28, $29 palette, and it is tiny. I describe this as like Polly Pocket makeup. I kind of like that. I think it's kind of cute, which I see the irony and kind of like hypocrisy that I criticize that in some palettes and some I don't. For whatever reason, I just really like this little palette. I think it's really cute. The formulas are really nice. It's a great way to try out a Pat McGrath palette or gift a Pat McGrath palette for people that otherwise would not want to spend $60 to $125 on one of her full-size palettes. So let me just give a couple of these some swatches. I love the color story. If you're into kind of warm purples or kind of bronzy, rosy shades, this is a really fun one. Great formulas. You get to try out her mattes, her shimmers. None of her like real special shades that have the extra sparkly glitter in them, but it's still a fun little palette. I love the little packaging. It's like play makeup for like luxury people. coming in at number 11, going with my Nabla Wild Berry Cutie palette. This is such a great little palette. If you love your berry tones, this is a stunning one. So there's actually a palette that reminds me a lot of this one. I should have grabbed it for you guys. It is the Juvia's Place, the 6 Pan, the Mauves palette. This is very similar to that palette. They give a very similar vibe and similar feel, similar kind of finished looks. But the one thing this palette I think has going for it, it has one of my beloved shades, the kind of creamier matte formulas. You guys, am I the only one that really appreciates these type of formulas? There's something about these. Working them into my crease in my outer corner, it just does something really nice for my eyelids. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit older. I do have a lot of fine lines here on this outer corner. Maybe that little bit of added hydration just makes them a little bit more flattering or a little bit easier to work with. You do have to build them up and work with them a little bit differently than you would a traditional matte, but I just love them so much. I think they are stunning. Love the duochrome here. I can't get enough of these type of shades that have that like purpley kind of blue iridescence, but they're not so bold to where you could see them from a mile away. It's really, really lovely. Cute, cute packaging. I love the packaging of all of the Cutie palettes. And this one is a really fun color story to play with when I'm looking for a berry toned eye that's a little bit more on the kind of bold and fun side. For number 10, I'm going to go with this palette from Sydney Grace. This is the Summer Days palette. It's not a new palette to them. They sent this to me about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and it is such a beautiful, beautiful palette. They look very pink inside the pan. Like when I opened this palette up for the first time, I was kind of like, huh, Summer Days. I was assuming that they would be bronzes and kind of golden browns. And I opened it up and they looked like pinky purples. But when you put these on your eyes, they're a lot warmer than they appear inside the pan. They definitely give you that bronzy kind of vibe or feel. We just swatch a couple of these. Again, they look a little bit more purpley here. Like that shade looks a little bit more cool and purpley, but like a shade like this, like you start blending that into your crease and it has just the tiniest bit of like a warm tan that really kind of brings out its warmth, especially when you combine it with some of the shimmers in here, which are quite warm, very, very, very metallic. I love the Sydney Grace metallics. I'll say it every time, but it's just so metallic. I mean, it is absolutely lovely. Look at that copper color right there. It is absolutely gorgeous. Love this shade, which is more of like a shell pink. It's so stunning. Oh my goodness, look at that metallic, you guys, like liquid metal. And then of course the champagne gold. I'm a sucker for champagne gold. This palette's a bit of a chameleon to me. Every time I use it, the looks come out more brown than they look inside the pan. Great mix of matte to shimmer, light to dark. Great little palette if you like neutral, warm, even slightly pink summery eyes. Ranked at number 9, I am going to go with the Heather Austin and Adept Cosmetics palette. This palette is so good, you guys. Now, I will just say this. This is a palette for those of you that don't mind a bold look because the shimmers in here, they're out of this world. I don't own shimmers anywhere else in my collection that are quite like this. They all have this really amazing, I think I described it as like a duochrome on steroids, which is exactly what I would say. I have a lot of duochromes within my collection, but none of them are quite as crazy and reflective and in the most beautiful way as these. They are literally like if a mermaid was real and her tail was crushed into an eyeshadow. That sounds a little gross, but this is what you would get. This is like a mermaid tail. I mean these, and it's not just this shade. There are several shades in this palette that have this quality to them. So that was the shade Passport, one that I really love. I also love the shade Austin. Another one of the more like extra mermaid type shades. Look at this, you guys. Oh my gosh, they're so creamy. They're insane. They're absolutely insane. This one is much more like kind of pink toned, like it has a pink kind of gold iridescence, whereas this one has more of like a purpley green kind of iridescence. This palette was done by my friend Heather Austin here on YouTube. She did such a great job with this. Such a great palette. Congrats to Heather. I think she did such a great job on this one. It's a really fun palette if you're into color, if you're into shine, iridescence, and sparkle, if you like mermaids. I think you would absolutely love this palette right here. One of the most unique palettes that I've tried in my lifetime. That brings us to my number 8 palette. For this, I'm gonna go with the Sydney Grace Be Mine palette. So this was their release around Valentine's Day, and it is beautiful. This is such a pretty palette. I love the way this palette is set up. You get some really good basics in here, lots of pinks. I think I've said this a few times, but the way Sydney Grace does their like soft pinks and purples, they're so good. And this gives you a whole row of those. Also, you get a row of like warm bronzes, some gold, and then down here you get some beautiful kind of smoky, shimmery shades. It's a great palette. Same Sydney Grace formula I love. I love the variety in this one. Like, it's one that it would be good to travel with because you get so many options in here. Really fun one. Sydney Grace has yet to disappoint me with their eyeshadow palettes, and that's just another one that proves it. Ranked at number 6, I've got to go with the Essence My Rose Will Go On palette. Every night in my dreams, I see you, I feel you. I hope you got that Celine Dion reference. This is such a good little palette, you guys. I love these Essence palettes. And the reason I'm ranking them so high, I mean, I kind of feel weird ranking this palette above like a Sydney Grace palette, which you guys know I love so much, but there is something to be said about the packaging and quality of these eyeshadows and like the color layouts. They're so good for such a crazy good price. Like, they're so good. I cannot believe how great all these palettes are. But this is another one that I've really fallen in love with. This palette and the looks I get from this small 6-pan little palette remind me a lot of the Blush Crush palette from ColourPop, which is such a great little palette. It's been a long time favorite of mine. It's a staple in my collection. If you like soft, elegant, romantic pinks, this is the epitome of that in a tiny little compact, cute pink palette. I can't say enough good things about these. Anyone could afford these. They are so affordable. Like $3.99 a piece. I just think these are great. You get a mirror inside. The packaging is kind of like, even though it's small and compact, it's very travel friendly, it feels good quality. I'm just so happy with these. I think they're great. They were one of the greatest drugstore eyeshadow successes, in my opinion, of the last like 12 to, I don't know how long these been out, 12 to 18 months. Which is why, ranked at number 5, I'm gonna go with the Nothing Compares to Nude palette. Another great one from Essence. Again, I've tried a few other of these out. I tried at the end of 2021. These ones I tried out towards the beginning of 2022 because I had to go back and collect them all. And this one is great. You're not gonna get a lot of like richness and depth and not a lot of transition shades in here. Like these two shades right here, they're almost both even too light for me, and I have more like light, almost light medium skin when I have a little bit of a tan, but I still love this palette. The shimmers are great. They're not overly metallic. They're the type of shimmers that I feel like give a little bit of sparkle to your eye, but they're not gonna make your eyes look overly reflective or emphasize texture if you have more mature eyelids. They're just the most user-friendly eyeshadow palette. Great packaging again. Let's just swatch a couple of these. Look at those shimmers. I mean, they're all kind of like simple and basic, but sometimes simple and basic you can't go wrong with. And again, the price, under $5. I mean, you just cannot beat that. That leads us to my top 4. Coming in at number 4, and this is one I feel like could move up in the rankings, and it is the Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace and Mel Thompson. This was sent to me by Sydney Grace this year, which was so exciting, by the way. The fact that Sydney Grace sent me some PR, they're like one of my favorite brands ever. So again, thank you to Sydney Grace for sending this to me. This is worth every penny that, I mean, I didn't spend any money on it, but I would, if this broke, I would go buy it like immediately because it is so good. This is the perfect palette if you like a lot of neutrals and occasionally a few pops of color to either use on their own or to work into looks. I love that the colors are a little bit more soft and kind of pastel, but you still get plenty of like deep mattes in here. Lots of gorgeous shimmers in here that are all very unique, but like still very wearable. I love it. You get like a nice like icy kind of champagne, beautiful shade for the inner corner if you really want to go right on the inner lid. I love this shade right here, which is kind of like a gold with the tiniest touch of green in it. Oh, I love these type of shades. They are so pretty. You get a pink, you get a coral, you get this shade that's kind of like matte club. I actually don't use these type of shades super often, but they're fun to have when you want to do something a little bit more smoky. This is a palette I want to reach for when I just want to do something like outside of the box, or I want to be a little bit more creative. I love palettes like that generally, and this is a great candidate for like my perfect palette. So happy to finally have this. I know that it's older. A lot of you guys have maybe already owned this, maybe forgotten about it, but if you did overlook this one, as I did, it's absolutely worth it. I am so enjoying this palette. This is one of the top ones that I've been reaching for over the last couple months. Coming in at number 3 is the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today. Let's see if you guys guessed it right. It is the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. I think this is such a fun release from Natasha Denona. I was this close to not buying this palette and trying it out. I saw this one, I thought, well, that's definitely not me. Look at all that color. And then I started to look at it a little bit more deeply, and I was like, well, they're not as bold looking as like colors that usually scare me away, you know, kind of like this. So I thought about it a little bit, started to see a few looks with this one, and then I thought to myself, well, I almost have all the mid-size palettes. Why stop now? And that's really what pushed me to get this palette. Sadly, that's the reason I got it, because I was like, well, I gotta collect them all. I'm so glad that I did though, because this is the funnest palette to play with. Now, you don't get anything bold in here. Like, I find myself typically when I do a makeup look, I kind of go into this like robot mode where I'm like mid-tone shade through the crease, something dark and smoky in the outer corner, something shimmery and bright on the lid. Like, that's kind of my thought process with any palette that I'm creating a makeup look with. This forces me to do something a little bit different because it doesn't give you those deep outer corner shades, but I think that's good because when you're using shades like this that are more They're vibrant without being too neon. I don't really want to smoke out my outer corner because I think that would just be a little bit much. So this kind of forces me to play with color in the way that works for me. And every look that I have created with this palette, even the blues, work for me. And I have so much fun creating them. For example, today, all I did was go in with this peach all up through the crease. That's the only shade that you're seeing. I really built that up right there above my crease. Then I went all over the lid with this kind of lemony, shimmery yellow that's nice and bright. It's so, so pretty. It's this like just very brightening, lemony kind of shade that's not overly yellow. And then I just put a little bit of this matte kind of seafoam color on my lower lash line, and I think this is such a fun look that's colorful without being bold. I mean, you wouldn't look at me even up close and be like, whoa, Mrs. Rainbow. You would barely see that hint of color, and it's so, so fun. It's a palette that makes me really happy. Whenever I play with this palette, it just puts me in a good mood. It's a good one. So glad that I bought that one, because again, you guys, I was this close to saying no to it. But it's proved to be one of the funnest palettes in my collection, which is why it's coming in at number 3. All right, number 2. This is one of my favorite more neutral palettes in my collection. It's the Nabla Cutie Nude Palette. So this palette looks pretty basic, looks pretty simple. You can see how dirty it is. I reach for this palette all the time. Like, there's something about the tones of these shades that's very unique. I have a lot of palettes that have like tans or bronzes and a lot more kind of mauves and pinks. This one's like somewhere there in that, like in the middle. Like, it's kind of mauvey, but it's not purple, but it's not pink, but it's not bronze. It's kind of like a color theme all of its own. It's so unique. I can't explain it. It's not warm, but it's not cool. It's not pink, but it's not purple, but it's not brown. They're just the most beautiful, beautiful shades that just look so good on the eyes. These are the type of shades, every time I wear these, I'm like, dang, my eyeshadow looks good. And it's not me, it's the shadows. They're just that good. These have an abundance of that formula that I love so much from Nabla that I'm always talking about. All 3 of the mattes inside here, including this black, which I don't use a ton, but I will use this to kind of smoke out my lash line a little bit instead of using a liner, and it works great. While it's not initially as pigmented, it is more creamy. So you can really build up some richness in this as you layer it up. Watch guys, watch this. Prepare to be amazed. You can just get this like inky quality out of this. Look at that, you guys. It's like paint. It's amazing. And then those are not even to be outdone by these beautiful shimmers right here. So you get a gold, you get a pink, you get kind of, oh boy, my fingers are dirty. You get more of like a bronzy shade here that's still kind of pink in tone. So let's see, gold, right there that has a little bit of pink in it. Oh my goodness. Seriously, I'm excited all over again, and I've had this palette for a long, long time. There's the kind of pinky rose, beautiful mid-tone lid shade, and then this is the one that's more like the golden color, but it does have a bit of pink in it as well. They're absolutely gorgeous. Never disappoints me. There's a reason I reach for it over and over again. Even when I haven't had it in my shop, my stash, it always ends up over here because it's one of those palettes that I'm just, on certain days, I just need a palette that I know is not gonna fail me, and that's one of the ones that I first reach for. And that leaves us with my number 1 palette. Those of you that have been watching me all year, do you know what's left? Do you know what one's coming in at number 1? I am going with the Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette. This palette was a major, major win from ABH, who I had all but forgotten about over the last couple of years. I think the last palette I got super excited about from ABH was the Jackie Aina palette. And then this palette came out that looked kind of like their old palettes, which is kind of what caught my attention. And I looked at the color story of this. Initially, I kind of thought like, oh, there's fewer shades in there. Is it kind of boring? But it also kind of looked interesting to me and different. So I bought it, and I'm so glad I did. This palette is a winner. Like, every shade inside here is very me. You cannot get a bad look out of this palette. And not just you can't get a bad look out of this, but there are so many great staple looks in here. Like, I love the green tones in here, especially like these 2 shades with this in the crease. So let me just swatch a couple of my favorite shades. Probably the shimmery green is like my favorite shade inside this palette. And this shimmery, I don't know, it's like a pinky bronze. It's really, really, it's more pink, but it has like a little bit of bronziness in it. So there's the pink. Oh, gorgeous lid shade. Look at this green, you guys. You know I love shades like this. It's beautifully done. The formulas are great. Let's swatch a couple more. I love this gold right here. It looks so good on the lid. It's more like a peach. It's gold that has a little bit of like a peachy undertone to it that makes it a little bit, not quite as icy as a traditional gold would be, and it's not brassy either. So I don't really like brassy golds most of the time. This bronze is beautiful, very simple bronze. I think would look good on so many different skin tones. It's gorgeous. And then of course the mattes inside here are stellar as well. This is a great palette, definitely worthy of the #1 spot. I'm so glad that I ended up going with this one. It is that type of a palette, kind of similar to the Nabla palette, where when I'm maybe in a hurry or I just don't really want to think about what I'm putting on my eyes, I just want something I know is going to look good. This is one of those palettes I will reach for. Had it for a few months now, and I am still as excited about it as I was when I first got it, and still using it often. Oh my goodness, you guys, that is it. Those are all 18 of my eyeshadow palettes. I hope I got the numbering right in there. I was trying to count backwards in my head. I probably should have put stickers on these or something. That's okay, I'll just correct it on screen for you guys if I got some of those wrong, but those are all my palettes ranked from 2022 so far. What did you guys think? What palettes have released this year that I've missed out on? We still got time. Let me know if you think there's something that I definitely need to try, especially maybe now that you have a better feel for kind of what my palette preferences are. What palettes have you guys tried out and loved during the year 2022 so far? I would love to hear down in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me give you one last reminder. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so now. Hit that notification bell as well, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye. It's like in Ghostbusters when they tell the guy not to think about the Steak Puft Marshmallow Man, and of course he does. That's me with songs. Like, don't think about it. You know, one song gets stuck in my head all the time. I don't know why. Like, this is not even a song that I like listen to. The I Wear My Sunglasses at Night song. Oh my gosh, shouldn't have said it. All very formula. You didn't see that, sorry. It's gross, Mandy, come on. Writing starts to rub off on the front. You can see mine's kind of like faded rose. My rose will apparently not go on. I love this palette with a passion of 1,000 suns.